Félix Michaud spent 9 years of his life in prison for first-degree murder. Even if he had no motive or no direct evidence linking him to the crime scene, one witness was enough to sentence him to hell on earth. It took him 3 trials to finally regain freedom. In this northwestern area of New Brunswick, people mainly live from the forest industry. Félix Michaud grew up in a big family. Since childhood, he has always dreamed of living in total harmony with the forest, even if it meant dropping out of school at a young age.
I always hated school because I thought that one doesn't need to go to school to work in the woods. My father was working in the woods and he had not needed school to do it. So I thought that if my father was able to work without going to school first, with the little education he had, I could also do it.
But when a river runs in the middle of the forest and separates Canada from the United States, it's tempting to do some smuggling.
I would take cigarettes and alcohol across the river at night. It's the best time. Everybody's sleeping. Nobody sees you going about, and the river is calm. It was easy to cross. Okay, I may have been stealing from the government, but I was not stealing from anybody poorer than myself. I was hurting no one. It was like a hobby for me. Just crossing the river and coming back with a sack of tobacco without getting caught was fun. I didn't think I'd be caught. At the time, I wasn't afraid of the police or of the wildlife officer, rangers. I knew they couldn't catch me because I changed place too often. I never had bad luck. I was always lucky. Luck was always with me back then.
But one night, his luck is about to run out. His wife being out, he takes care of his daughter, Cindy. It's already late when a visitor shows up.
I heard knocking at the back door on my shed. My shed was right next to the house, and I heard knocking, hard knocking. I went to open the door, and it was Marco. He wanted a ride to go down to Edmundston to get drugs. He wasn't a bad guy. He was having a hard time, was getting high a lot. He was stealing from his parents, stealing from his grandparents to get drugs. I know that Marco has never been charged for things he's done because of his dad and his reputation in the community.
In effect, Marco Albert's father works at Canadian Customs. In that border area, where people are crossing regularly between countries or do some smuggling, it's better to be in good terms with everyone, including the local customs officer, even if it means shrugging off his son's behavior. That night of December 3rd, 1991, Félix Michaud just doesn't feel like leaving his house.
I told him he was crazy. It's snowing outside. Look at the weather. I can't drive you. I have to take care of my daughter. So he said, "Do you want to smoke with me?" I said, "I don't mind." So we smoked a joint of hash, and then he was really high and started asking me again to drive him back. As he was leaving, he was frustrated and saying, "Come on, man, please take me there." He was almost on his knees for me to drive him to Edmundston, and I didn't want to drive. So I left, was frustrated, and I didn't see him again. The thing that woke me up was my wife was crying. She was sitting in the kitchen, she was crying. Her sister had come and told her that Mrs. Gagné's house had burnt in the night. I told her not to worry. We're going to get dressed. It may be a rumor. There are a lot of rumors, so we're going to go and see if it's true. So we got into my car and drove up there, and it was true. The house was down, and it had really burnt. She was a great woman. She was almost a mother for my daughter. She liked to help everybody. She was the kind of woman that would have seen you on the roadside, and if she knew you a little, would have asked you if you needed help, if you needed a ride somewhere. When I was living in Clare near the pharmacy, she often called me to bring up her medication because she was tired and she couldn't drive. Mrs. Gagné wanted me to buy the house next to hers because she wanted to spoil my daughter. And by buying the house next to Mrs. Gagné's, it would have given me better access to the United States that were behind my house, and I could have done my smuggling on the river more easily. The last time I saw Mrs. Gagné was during the fall, in October 1991. I'd gone hunting, and when I came back, we'd stopped by her place, me and Marco, because I wanted to have the address of the woman who owned the house next door. Marco didn't know Mrs. Gagné. He was looking everywhere. He was kind of nervous and was looking all around. I was at the table with Mrs. Gagné. She had a shoebox full of addresses and I was looking through it. I was watching her from time to time. I looked at Marco and he was looking at everything around him.
Unfortunately, on that 4th of December 1991, Rose Gagné's house is only a pile of ashes.
Everybody thought it was an accident. I never thought for a second that it could have been criminal.
The policeman's investigation concluding to an accidental death, the village buries Rose Gagné in the Connors Cemetery. Slowly, life returns to normal. Félix Michaud returns to his family and routine and continues to cross the St. John River many times a week.
I kept doing my smuggling until the month of May, when I started hearing that the police had reopened the investigation. They were saying that it was not an accident. What had happened to Mrs. Gagné was criminal. The only thing we heard was that the police was going from door to door to ask people questions. But they never came to my house asking me questions. They went everywhere else apart from my house. I didn't think much of it. I thought they wanted to leave me alone.
At the same time, the police proceeds with the exhumation of Rose Gagné's body.
It was none of my business. I was not concerned by any of this up until July 7th, when they came to arrest me. I had done a trip on the river on July 6th. My car was not running well, so I was changing the spark plugs, and I was planning another trip that night. I was screwing the last spark plug on it, the very last, as a police car rolled in my driveway. One officer came out and twisted my arm and my back, and he said, "You're under arrest for the death of Rose Gagné." My daughter was in the window and looking at me. They handcuffed me and read me my rights about 10 times. "You're entitled to a lawyer." I told them, "Why would I talk to a lawyer? I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't need a lawyer. I was only smuggling on the river. That's the only wrong thing I was doing. I wasn't hurting anyone." They charged me. I went in and never got out for 9 years.
7 months after Rose Gagné's death and the burning of her house that had been thought accidental, Félix Michaud was arrested on July 7th, 1991.
When I got to Edmundston, they put me in the same cell as Marco. I asked Marco what was happening. He said, "I don't know. They say I have something to do with Mrs. Gagné's death." I said, "Me too. That's what they're telling me." I've always thought they had made a mistake, that I had no business there, and tomorrow my lawyer will get me out, and it's an error. They made a mistake.
But the police do not agree. They don't seem to doubt that they have the culprit.
We know you've done that. We know you've done this. Well, if you know everything, why would I talk to you? I have the right to remain silent. Well, I'm going to use that right, and I will remain silent. I did not say anything else. I didn't say a word. I never talked. The next morning I woke up and Marco was gone. I was alone in the cell. I wasn't surprised that he wasn't there when I woke up. I thought they had taken him to another room to interrogate him. If he had done something wrong, it was his problem, not mine. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong.
In effect, Marco Albert said many things to the police. Just before going to court, Félix Michaud sees his misfortune companion for a last time.
He walked by my cell to go outside, and he stopped, and he apologized. "I'm sorry, man. I didn't want to do something like that to you, but I didn't want to go in by myself." That's what he told me. They took me to court and told me I was accused of manslaughter. When I got to court, they told me I was accused of felonious homicide. When I got in court, they told me I was accused of second-degree murder. And when I had my preliminary hearing, they charged me with first-degree murder. I found out that Marco Albert had implicated me in this after my preliminary hearing, when we asked the Crown for disclosures. They gave us the statements Marco had made. He had made 3. In the first 3 he had made, my name was not even mentioned. Then he gave another one, and it was written Felix had done this and Felix had done that. My name was everywhere in his statement. On top of that, he testified against me in my preliminary hearing, and he added some more. I thought he was a scumbag. He was a no good. He needed to lie to save himself from a crime that he may have committed.
Firstly accused of accomplice to murder, Marco Albert will see the charges against him reduced to accomplice to theft. He pleaded guilty and is convicted to 2 years in prison. Félix Michaud, who has pleaded not guilty to the first-degree murder accusation, is facing a life sentence in prison and is kept in detention.
It was a 4-foot by 6-foot cage. I had 3 iron walls. The cage was 6 feet 2 inches high because my head was rubbing against the ceiling. The ceiling was also made of iron. The floor was iron. There was a grill in front of me with bars. My mattress pressed against the bars, and I'm 6'2". I spent 11.5 months in that kind of a cage.
Félix Michaud gets a visit from his lawyer.
He brought my wife along to convince me to accept the deals the Crown was offering. I told my wife I had done nothing wrong, and I wouldn't accept this. I would never plead guilty to that. She was crying because she would lose me for 25 years instead of 7. So I said, if they send me away for 25 years, go on with your life. If you're there when I come out, you're there. If you're not, you're not. I'll start somewhere else. I'll leave you alone. I'll live my life, and you'll live yours. That's how it ended between us. When I got to court, I asked the judge to dismiss my lawyer because he was not working for me. He was working against me.
Robert McElwain and Patrick Murchison take over Félix Michaud's defense and ask Crown Prosecutor Jocelyne Moreau-Bérubé to transmit the proof. Then they discover that the RCMP opened the investigation on May 2nd, 1992, after a testimony from Luc Bonenfant, with whom Félix Michaud is not in good terms.
I knew Luc Bonenfant. He was trying to pick up my wife when I wasn't there. I wanted to catch him.
Luc Bonenfant asserts that Marco Albert told him that Rose Gagné's death was criminal and that Félix Michaud is involved. The police then decide to trap Marco Albert by placing a wire on Luc Bonenfant for the latter to repeat his story. However, the transcript and tapes are not transmitted to the defense. Rose Gagné's murder has shaken a whole region. For many people, the police has the culprit.
It's just a number, but I'd say 95% of people are convinced the accused is already guilty. In their mind, that's it. No matter what evidence you have, he stays guilty.
I couldn't believe my ears. Nobody would listen to my side of the story. They only wanted to hear Marco Albert. He still had forgotten details. He had to add some more during the first trial. He kept forgetting things and saying, Mrs. Prosecutor, I forgot to say this in my statement. I'd seen Félix strangling Mrs. Gagné, and he was choking her so tight that her head was bouncing on the bed, and I heard him rape Mrs. Gagné. So with the addition of rape, it became a first-degree murder. It felt weird to hear someone destroy somebody else's life like that.
Other witnesses show up. Wallace Breton swears under oath that he saw Félix Michaud's car at the place of the fire the night of the tragedy. As for Yvon Gravel, he states that Félix Michaud has offered him a medal that used to belong to Rose Gagné.
Yvon Gravel was seen by his next-door neighbor searching through the house's debris after everything was over.
The pathologist certifies that Rose Gagné died before the fire. Pushing his theory further, he pretends that Rose Gagné choked while vomiting from fear of being raped and battered.
I had a bad feeling because when my witnesses testified, the jurors weren't paying attention to him.
While the defense attorneys argue that no direct proof links Félix Michaud to the crime scene, Jocelyne Moreau-Bérubé insists on the past of the accused.
When I was younger, in the years 83, 85, I did 3 stupid things. But these I had done, so I pleaded guilty. If I had been caught smuggling on the river, I would have pleaded guilty. But having killed Mrs. Gagné, no. I'm not guilty of that. I did nothing to that woman.
The way he was dressed in court, the way he held himself, tough, he looked like a hardened criminal. He was convicted before the trial was over.
When the judge and the jurors entered and said I was guilty, it felt like everybody had left me.
On May 22nd, 1993, Félix Michaud was unsurprisingly found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment without a chance of parole before 25 years.
That was an error they made because I knew I had done nothing wrong.
Now that I know Felix well, I am sure that his naive personality must have played a part in his ordeal. It can be quite easy to jump to the conclusion and say, okay, he must be guilty. He doesn't defend himself. He must have done something.
They sent me straight away to the penitentiary. I was sharing my cell with another guy from Tracadie. He was supposed to be gone to take a shower. I hurried and tied my bed sheet around the sprinkler box. It was solid, and I hung myself. I read the Bible 3 times. They say in there that there is a second judgment somewhere. And I thought I would have my second judgment, and I would be free, found not guilty, and go to heaven. I hung myself. And he had forgotten something, shampoo or something. So when he came back in the cell, my feet were still hanging, and he helped me and got me off.
While Félix Michaud comes back to life, he doesn't know yet that he will be entitled to a second judgment on Earth. On May 22, 1992, Félix Michaud, in spite of his claims of innocence and that no direct proof links him to the murder of Rose Gagné, is sentenced to life in prison based on Marco Albert's testimony. While he is incarcerated at the Renous Penitentiary, his former friend's accusations haunt him.
When you have a first-degree murder charge, you're really quite nicely welcome because the lifers are really respected. But if you arrive with other charges, that's when things don't go so well.
And we know very well that in prison, the sexual offenders are at the bottom of the pile. They are considered the worst of the worst, so they become targets for all the other inmates.
There have been many inmates who confronted me. I've been surrounded many times. The pathologist had testified at my preliminary hearing and had said there were no signs of rape and no signs of strangulation. But when you don't have proof, your chances to escape are not very good.
Every time his story was mentioned in the media or when somebody found an old newspaper article where all the accusations against Felix were listed, his problems with other convicts started all over again. He had to prove himself, he had to defend himself against all these accusations just to protect himself, to survive. It was hell for him.
You have to save your skin, because if you don't defend yourself, it's them or you.
Oh my God. It's surreal. Feels like we're in a movie.
I had asked her if she could come and visit me. I felt lonely. I had no visitors.
When I came into the room, Felix was waiting for me with open arms, all happy. "How are you, Auntie?" he goes. "Thank you, Auntie."
I had a lot of encouragement from my aunt when she came to visit. She was always telling me to hold on, that everything happens for a reason, things like that. That there is a light at the end of the tunnel. That it was for me to cross it. But it was hard to cross.
Every time I went to see him, he always claimed he was innocent. He always said he was not guilty.
As I was not guilty, I would have liked to be able to leave with them. So I had set my mind to it that I was going to stay there for the rest of my life.
But after 4 years of imprisonment on June 20th, 1996, the Supreme Court requests a new trial after the appeal from Félix Michaud's lawyers. In their report, the judges have been very harsh towards Jocelyne Moreau-Bérubé. The Crown Prosecutor has shown a lack of professionalism and has derogated from her obligation to be just. She has used an inflammatory language and has deceived the jury by giving her personal opinion and by playing with emotions to influence it. It was the judge's duty to explain to the jury that Félix Michaud's guilt had to be clearly based on facts and not on impressions. Kim Jensen, who was leading the appeal procedure, asked Gilles Lemieux to take charge of Marco Albert's French interrogation. The meeting between the lawyer and Félix Michaud will be decisive.
I always tell people that the first meeting has two purposes. Are you comfortable with me? And am I comfortable with you? The thing that hit me with Felix was how much he was open and how he was precise, clear, and unequivocal about his innocence. And the other thing that stuck with me and made me understand how much he wanted to prove his innocence is that I got out of prison with a feeling that something must be done, because I felt inside that an error had been made.
He told me that he believed me and that he'd work on my case. No other lawyer had ever said he believed me. They said, "We're going to work for you, we're going to take your case." But they never told me they believed me. He told me, "I believe you. I believe what you told me. I'll work for free if need be. I'll get you out of here one day."
Gilles Lemieux will work tirelessly to make good on his promise. Since the charges are based only on Marco Albert's testimony, he will labor at finding flaws in his various statements.
The statements Marco has made to the RCMP, his successive statements, seem in my opinion to be clear attempts at getting out of trouble. He tried to use Felix, put all the blame on him to get out of it. There were many statements, one in particular, where he says that Felix was in the room with Mrs. Gagné and he saw him strangling her and that he was watching a religious program. I quickly imagined that the RCMP had looked at everything available about TV programming at Mrs. Gagné's that night. We also did it, and there were no programs of such a nature. I was going to attack his credibility. At that point, I was thinking that if I could do a reasonable cross-examination and raise some doubts in the minds of the jury, and because the jury had nothing to gain or lose from it, that they would hammer the last nail in the coffin.
Gilles Lemieux has never been so right. While Félix Michaud, confident in his future, prepares for his trial in prison, he gets a phone call on August 17th, 1996.
I said, "It's impossible. We're going to trial in 3 weeks. We have new witnesses." We wanted to question him against these witnesses.
Reading the testimony was certainly necessary because he was no longer there to testify.
He wasn't there, so we had to examine a piece of paper. You can't make a piece of paper talk.
It's a terrible blow for the defense. In one or the other of the statements that are not exactly the same, Marco Albert incriminates Félix Michaud, but the worst part is that Gilles Lemieux will not be able to cross-examine him to challenge Marco Albert's credibility.
Marco Albert left a suicide note asking for forgiveness for his mistakes. When he mentions the harm he's done, does he mean what he's done to Felix, or what he's done to Mrs. Gagné, or to his family?
While Judge Deschênes hears for the defense, 3 witnesses who have shared Marco Albert's cell and to whom he confided having committed perjury, Jean-Marie Bérubé, who has met Félix in prison, testifies for the Crown. In his statement, Marco Albert has murdered, but Félix Michaud has raped.
Jean-Marie was in a cell and he wasn't liked in the other sections. He never had any money. He was borrowing from everybody, including me. He knew I always had tobacco, and he asked me for some, and I refused to give him any. So that's when he made a statement against me.
The pathologist who has testified, Dr. Michaud, has testified in both trials, and in the first one, he was convinced that Mrs. Gagné had choked on vomit from fear of rape and battering. During the second trial, he completely rebutted the testimony, and he said that it was decomposed food. And the person who was certain to have seen Felix's vehicle was not so sure anymore.
Before the jury withdrew, everybody was quite confident that they didn't have enough proof that I would get out.
I was letting myself hope more and more that Felix would be released and he would be found not guilty, because I thought the average man would have reasonable doubt. They still took many hours. When I saw the jury come back, I was certain they would find him guilty, because everybody kept their head low. Nobody was looking at Felix or me.
When they gave me the verdict for the second trial, I'm going, but I'm going back inside. There's no justice. They don't see straight or what?
I took him in my arms, and I told him, Felix, if you're guilty, just tell me. I won't condemn you. He looked straight into my eyes and said, Auntie, I wasn't even there. He had tears in his eyes. I wasn't even there, he said.
Gilles came to see me and said, Felix, hang on. I know you're not guilty, and I won't quit as long as I haven't gotten you out of here.
I knew there were some procedural errors that enabled us to appeal the case.
Actually, Judge Deschênes had made a serious procedure mistake. When instructing the jurors, he told them they could still consider Félix Michaud guilty of first-degree murder, even if Jean-Marie Bérubé's testimony specified that Marco Albert had killed and Félix Michaud raped. In the meantime, Gilles Lemieux finds evidence in the file that had been hidden from the defense since the beginning.
Before that, I had no idea that evidence existed. As for the police, I have no idea why they hid that, or any idea as to why the Crown hid that.
In February 2000, the New Brunswick Court of Appeal had ordered a new trial. Gilles Lemieux, in charge of Félix Michaud's defense, cannot understand how such a case can hold in such a thin file.
I remember a conversation I had with Mr. Murchison, another lawyer, telling him there must be more than 350 pages of court documents and transcripts. There must be more, somewhere. So I asked the judge to order an account of what was in the court file. To my great wonder, my shock, my surprise, there were not 350 pages. There were 8,000 and more. There were boxes and boxes of new evidence, videos, audio.
I didn't know that they had tapes about me. Neither at the first trial nor at the second trial was I aware they had tapes, they had worn body packs and wiretaps. I had no idea they existed.
As we were looking at this new evidence, we were amazed by the sheer volume of information.
As for the police, I don't know why they hid this. No idea why the Crown has hidden this. If the Crown knows the police possess documents, the Crown should speak up and tell the defense, which hasn't been done.
We will never know why Marco Albert's tapes, contradicting his statements, have finally been sent to the defense. Maybe someone at the prosecutor's office wanted fair justice to be done in the end. While Gilles Lemieux listens to the audio tapes, Félix Michaud in jail continues his fight.
When I was in jail and fighting for my rights, the guards didn't like it because I was seen as a leader. I was trying to help myself and read so much in legal books that I helped inmates to find problems in their documents. So the guards were saying that I was a leader or an instigator.
Leader ou un instigateur.
I finally managed to convince his father to come and visit him. It was a very, very tough visit for both of them.
I felt really bad for him. When I saw his reaction when he came to visit me, I asked my aunt not to bring him anymore. I preferred knowing him at home than seeing him there. I could see he was sad. He didn't come back to visit me after that. The next time I saw him, he was in a hospital bed and he died after.
Il est mort grave.
They brought him to the funeral, handcuffed, ankles chained. We did, though, manage to convince the sheriff to let him come with us to the after-funeral lunch before taking him back to prison.
Félix Michaud will never get the chance to give his dad the joy of seeing him a free man again. The third trial was planned for May 2001. Relentlessly, Gilles Lemieux keeps listening to the audio tapes, and his labor will soon pay off.
What he didn't know was that I took the audio of that conversation that was absolutely zero in terms of quality, and I sent it to a studio in Fredericton to have the sound cleaned. Then the sound was not extraordinary, but with the transcripts, what was happening was crystal clear.
Luc Bonenfant was wearing a wire under his shirt, and he went to see Marco Albert and suggested, "Wasn't Felix the guy with you?" Marco said no. Bonenfant suggested 2-3 times, "Wasn't Felix with you?" And he said, "No, are you crazy? Felix was never with me."
Marco was really contradicting himself. Felix was not implicated.
He admitted it on the body pack. I had nothing to do with this.
These tapes of Marco Albert that exonerated Félix Michaud have never been shared with the defense.
The question becomes, has there been malicious intent? And if so, from whom? Here we have a big legal team of prosecutors, and in my opinion, the whole team has missed the boat. They did not start with the goal to convict Felix Michaud just because they wanted to convict him. Somewhere someone believed Felix Michaud to be guilty. And the judge has concluded that since the proof was not available, that Marco Albert's cross-examination was not complete and was unreliable, that he would exclude Marco Albert's testimony. The judge has told the prosecutor, "I will exclude the testimony. Are you ready to start the trial?"
Procureur, j'exclus le témoignage. Êtes-vous prêt à commencer le procès?
Obviously, the Crown prosecutor then got up and said, "Upon a request from the New Brunswick General Prosecutor, we want to stop the procedures." Which meant that after 9 years and a few days, a few months actually, Felix was free, as if he had never been charged.
I didn't really understand what had happened. Gilles told me, "You're coming with us. You're free."
He just couldn't fathom that suddenly he could go outside, no handcuffs, no ankle chains, alone.
When I got out, I went through the door, and I couldn't believe it. I thought it was like an escape.
Félix Michaud, accompanied by Gilles Lemieux, Patrick Murchison, and his aunt Antonia, celebrated his release in a motel.
The following morning, when the sun rose, I woke up my lawyers. I don't remember the time, but I know the sun was rising. It was a beautiful red sun.
Something heavy jumped on my bed like a big weight. It was Felix. He wanted me to follow him, and I asked him where we were going, and he said, "The sun is rising." I said, "Yeah, so?"
Gilles said jokingly, "You woke us up just to show us the rising sun?" I said, "Don't you think it's beautiful?"
He said to me, "It's been 9.5 years since I saw the sunrise. Why don't you come and watch it with me?" It was pretty emotional.
After those brief moments of euphoria, life has not been easy.
The judge never told me I wasn't guilty. Nobody ever told me I wasn't guilty. If I'd heard these words, I wouldn't feel so much like I had escaped. I'm trying to get that in my head. I'm not incarcerated. I can go where I want. I'm not where I was 9 years ago in the past. Some days when I'm really relaxed, it feels like ages since I've been released. But other days, when I'm really stressed, it feels like it was yesterday. I still walk with my head low. Nobody apologized. Nobody said they'd made an error. Nobody said anything to me. They just said, "You're free to go." That's it.
That's it.
I have a scanner at home which I often listen to because in the past I'd done nothing wrong and they came to my house and arrested me. So today I'm always afraid they'll come to arrest me and incarcerate me again for no reason. So if I would hear my name on the scanner, I wouldn't feel right. I'd hide in nature, and a year later, I'd go see what they want. That's what I'm left with. The feeling that one day they'll come back to take me because they didn't tell me I wasn't guilty. That's why I go in the woods, to try to relax, to touch reality. I'm not in prison. I'm outside, and I'm free. I can go in the woods. I can go wherever I want to. I'm free. If it hadn't happened to me, maybe my life would be different, because I could have followed the course of life. I could have followed everybody. I often think about seeing my daughter again. I'd love to see her, and I always think about the day I'll see her again. When I left for jail, she had just turned 4 and grew up while I spent 9 years behind bars. And now I'm like a stranger to her, so I can't blame her if she doesn't want to see me. I'm giving her all the time she needs, and she'll come and see me when she's ready, and I don't want to force her or interrupt the life she has, and I don't want to bother her. I always hope that one day she'll contact me and we'll be able to meet and be able to make up for the lost time, talk and do things together. I could become her father again, as I was before.
Some sequences of this movie have been shot on Father's Day. Cindy, Félix Michaud's daughter, has made her father a surprise by offering him a letter, but also by opening her arms to him. In 2001, Félix Michaud filed a civil lawsuit to seek compensation for the 9 years he has spent unjustly in jail.